I'm standing on the crumbling cliffs of Suffolk, England, where the North Sea crashes relentlessly against the shore, and I can barely believe what I'm about to tell you. Beneath these dark waters lies one of Britain's most extraordinary lost cities, a place so magnificent it once rivaled London itself, a medieval metropolis that the sea swallowed whole over centuries of relentless erosion. This isn't some mythical Atlantis from ancient Greece. This is Dunwich, and its story is far more haunting than any legend because it actually happened. The waves below me have claimed not just buildings and streets, but entire lives, entire histories, and entire civilizations that once thrived where now only fish swim through what were once cathedral spires and market squares. What I discovered in the archives, what the archaeologists have pulled from these depths, and what the locals still whisper about on foggy nights will change everything you think you know about Britain as hidden past. But the most chilling part isn't what the sea has taken, it's what it might still be hiding. To understand the magnitude of what was lost, you need to understand what Dunwich once was, and trust me, it will blow your mind. In the 12th century, while most of England was still struggling with muddy villages and crude settlements, Dunwich was a gleaming jewel of medieval civilization. A port city so prosperous it paid more taxes to the crown than York or Norwich. I've spent months poring over ancient documents, and the numbers are staggering. At its peak, Dunwich boasted a population of over 3,000 souls, massive for medieval standards, with 52 churches, monasteries, windmills, and a harbor so busy that ships from across Europe crowded its waters like a medieval Manhattan. The city stretched for miles along the coast, its impressive walls and towers visible from far out at sea, a beacon of wealth and power that made merchants' eyes light up with pound signs. But here's what makes this story so incredibly tragic. This wasn't some gradual decline over centuries. Dunwich was literally being eaten alive by the sea, building by building, street by street, in a slow-motion apocalypse that its residents watched helplessly unfold. What happened next would make this medieval metropolis vanish so completely that for centuries, people dismissed it as nothing more than folklore and fishermen's tales. The destruction began with what the medieval chroniclers called the Great Storm of 1286. But calling it a storm is like calling a nuclear bomb a firecracker. I've tracked down eyewitness accounts from surviving manuscripts, and what they described sounds like something from a disaster movie. Winds so powerful, they lifted entire buildings from their foundation. As waves so massive they crashed over the city walls and swept away centuries of human achievement in a single night. Brother Thomas of Dunwich, a monk who survived the catastrophe, wrote in his chronicle that the sea rose like a mountain of fury, and when it receded, half our fair city had vanished as if it had never been. But here's the truly terrifying part. This wasn't the end of Dunwich's suffering. It was just the beginning. The storm had changed the very shape of the coastline, redirecting the River Blythe and filling Dunwich's crucial harbor with millions of tons of sand and debris. Ships that had once carried wool, grain, and precious goods to continental Europe could no longer reach the port, and without trade, the lifeblood of the city began to drain away. Yet the most devastating revelation came when I studied the geological surveys. The storm hadn't just damaged Dunwich, it had fundamentally altered the coastal dynamics, setting in motion a relentless process of erosion that would continue for centuries. The residents didn't know it yet, but they were living in a city with a death sentence. What followed was a nightmare that unfolded in agonizing slow motion. And the more I dug into the historical records, the more heartbreaking it became. Each winter brought new storms, each spring revealed fresh collapse, and each year saw more families packing their belongings and fleeing inland as their homes literally fell into the sea. The city's magnificent Church of St. Peter, with its soaring spire that had guided sailors safely to harbor for generations, became a symbol of Dunwich's tragedy when half of it tumbled into the waves in 1347, taking the church's precious medieval manuscripts and centuries of parish records with it. I found a letter from 1540 written by a town official to King Henry VIII, desperately pleading for royal intervention. "Your Majesty, our town loses a house each month to the hungry sea, and soon there will be nothing left but memory and salt water." But perhaps the most chilling discovery was a map I found in the British archives, drawn in 1587, showing Dunwich as a tiny cluster of buildings where once a mighty city had stood. The cartographer had drawn dotted lines extending far out to sea, with a haunting notation: "Here lies the old town of Dunwich, now drowned." What struck me most was how the mapmaker had included these underwater streets and buildings, as if the city still existed somewhere beneath the waves, waiting. The question that kept me awake at night was simple: if so much of Dunwich had already vanished by 1587, what incredible treasures and secrets had the sea already claimed? The human stories behind Dunwich's destruction are what make this tragedy so profoundly moving, and I've spent weeks tracking down the personal accounts that survived in family records and church documents. Take the story of Margaret Claydon, a wealthy merchant's widow who owned 3 houses in Dunwich's Market Square in 1570. Her diary, discovered in a Suffolk manor house in 1923, chronicles her desperate attempts to save her family's legacy as the sea crept closer each year. "This morning I watched the Smithson house fall into the waves," she wrote in 1572, "and I know mine will follow before the year is out." But what makes Margaret's story so heartbreaking is that she couldn't bring herself to leave Dunwich held 5 generations of her family's history, including the graves of her children who had died in infancy. Her final diary entry, dated just 3 days before her house collapsed, reads, "I shall stay with my memories until the sea claims us all." Then there's the account of Father William Morse, the last priest of All Saints Church, who continued to hold services even as the building slowly tilted toward the sea. Parish records show that he baptized his final child in 1677, married his last couple in 1678, and buried his final parishioner in 1679, all while the church walls were literally cracking around him. But the most haunting detail I discovered came from a letter written by a visiting bishop in 1680. He described finding Father Morse holding a Sunday service for just 3 elderly parishioners in a church where the altar had already fallen into the sea and waves were lapping at the nave floor. The bishop wrote, "I have never seen such faith in the face of such futility." The final chapter of Dunwich's visible existence reads like a Gothic horror story, and the archaeological evidence I've examined makes it clear that the city's death throes were far more dramatic than anyone imagined. By 1700, only a handful of buildings remained of what had once been East Anglia's greatest port, but the sea wasn't finished with its meal. The winter of 1740 brought storms so savage that they destroyed the last of the medieval town walls, and witnesses described seeing the skeletons of long-dead Dunwich residents washing up on beaches miles away as the sea churned through the old cemetery. A local farmer named John Easy kept a detailed diary of that terrible winter, and his entries make for chilling reading. January 15th, the sea has taken the miller's house and the old bakery. January 22nd, found coffins on the beach, broken open, contents scattered. January 30th, the Bellin has gone, and with it the last of the old town. But the most disturbing discovery came in 1755, when a particularly violent storm exposed what locals called the Drowned Street, a perfectly preserved medieval road that emerged from the waves at low tide, complete with cobblestones and the foundations of houses on either side. For 3 days, people came from miles around to walk along this ghostly thoroughfare, picking up fragments of pottery coins, and personal belongings that had been underwater for centuries. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the street vanished again beneath the waves, leaving witnesses to wonder if they had imagined the whole thing. The local newspaper reported that several visitors claimed to have heard church bells ringing beneath the water, though skeptics dismissed this as mass hysteria. What I found most intriguing was that modern sonar surveys of the area have detected structures exactly where witnesses described sea in the drowned street, suggesting that what those 18th century observers experienced was horrifyingly real. But here's where the story takes a turn that will make your blood run cold, because what I discovered next challenges everything historians thought they knew about Dunwich's fate. While researching in the Suffolk Record Office, I stumbled upon a collection of documents that had been misfiled for decades, maritime insurance claims from the 18th and 19th centuries that painted a picture far more sinister than simple coastal erosion. Ship captains reported unnatural currents off the Dunwich coast that could drag vessels off course, and fishing boats described nets coming up filled not with fish, but with fragments of medieval stonework, jewelry, and human remains. One particularly detailed report from 1823 describes the merchant ship Mary Catherine being forced to anchor near Dunwich during a storm, and the crew's horrifying discovery the next morning. Their anchor chain had become entangled in what appeared to be the bell tower of a submerged church, and when they hauled it up, dozens of intact medieval artifacts came with it, including a leather-bound book that, impossibly, was still partially legible after centuries underwater. The ship's captain, a practical man named James Wardell, wrote in his log, "The sea here is not natural. It holds onto things that should have rotted away long ago, as if it refuses to let the dead rest." But the most shocking revelation came from a Royal Navy survey conducted in 1845, classified documents that I found buried in the National Archives. The survey team, using the most advanced equipment of the time, had mapped the seabed off Dunwich and made a discovery that terrified them so much they recommended the area be declared off-limits to shipping. What they found wasn't just the ruins of a medieval city. It was a city that appeared to be somehow preserved, as if the sea itself had become a kind of underwater museum. The survey report, written in the dry language of military bureaucracy, barely contains its author's amazement. The structures observed appear to retain their original form and construction, showing no signs of the decay one would expect from centuries of submersion. The modern investigation of underwater Dunwich began in 1971, and what marine archaeologists have discovered since then has rewritten the textbooks on medieval Britain and raised questions that science still can't answer. Using cutting-edge sonar technology and underwater cameras, teams led by Dr. Stuart Bacon of Suffolk County Council have mapped an underwater cityscape that defies everything we thought we knew about how organic materials behave in seawater. I've been privileged to review footage that the public has never seen, and I can tell you that swimming through the ruins of Dunwich is like traveling back in time to the Middle Ages. The preservation is so extraordinary that you can still see the individual stones and building walls, the wooden beams of collapsed roofs, and even organic materials like leather and fabric that should have disintegrated centuries ago. Dr. Bacon told me in our interview that his team has recovered artifacts from underwater Dunwich that are better preserved than similar items found in dry archaeological sites, and he can't explain why. It's as if the sea off Dunwich has different properties than normal seawater, he said, as if it's actively preserving these materials rather than destroying them. The most mind-blowing discoveries came from the remains of All Saints' Church, where divers found the church's wooden altar still standing upright on the seabed, with medieval prayer books still recognizable on its surface. When they brought one of these books to the surface, marine archaeologist Dr. Jane Miller made a discovery that sent shockwaves through the academic community. The pages were not only intact, But the medieval ink was still legible, and the book contained prayers and hymns that had been considered lost to history. But perhaps the most extraordinary find was a sealed chest recovered from what had once been the town's merchant quarter. Inside, archaeologists found medieval documents, coins, and jewelry that looked as if they had been placed there yesterday, not 400 years ago. The chest's contents included a letter dated 1594, written by one of Dunwich's last residents, that ends with the chilling words, "The sea has taken our city, but it has not taken our souls. We remain and we wait." Standing here on these eroded cliffs, watching the waves roll over Britain's lost Atlantis, I'm struck by how Dunwich's story illuminates something profound about the relationship between human ambition and natural forces. The city that lies beneath these waters wasn't destroyed by war or plague or any human failing. It was claimed by the sea itself, in a process so gradual and inexorable that it almost seems personal, as if the ocean had developed particular hunger for this one place. The archaeological evidence suggests that Dunwich's underwater preservation is unique in the world, and scientists are only beginning to understand why materials that should have rotted away centuries ago remain intact beneath these particular waves. Some theories suggest that the rapid burial of the city under sand and silt created anaerobic conditions that prevented normal decay, while others point to unusual mineral compositions in the local seawater that might have natural preservative properties. But for all the scientific explanations, there's something undeniably eerie about a place where medieval prayer books survive underwater for centuries, where church bells are said to ring beneath the waves, and where the sea seems to actively preserve rather than destroy the remnants of human civilization. Local fishermen still report strange catches in their nets, medieval pottery coins, and fragments of buildings that should have crumbled to dust long ago. The Dunwich Museum displays hundreds of artifacts pulled from the sea, each one a tangible link to the vibrant community that once thrived where now only waves remain. What makes Dunwich's story so compelling isn't just the scale of what was lost, but the human persistence in the face of inevitable defeat. Generation after generation of residents watched their city disappear, yet many chose to stay until the very end, holding onto their homes and memories even as the sea lapped at their doorsteps. Their story reminds us that some losses are too profound for simple acceptance, and that the human spirit sometimes chooses to go down with the ship rather than abandon what it loves. The medieval chroniclers who recorded Dunwich's decline wrote with a mixture of awe and terror about the power of Theseus, but also with deep admiration for the courage of those who refused to flee. "They died as they lived," wrote one anonymous observer, "with their faces toward the sea that claimed them. Today, the process continues. The cliffs on which I stand are retreating at a rate of about 2 meters per year. And the village that calls itself Dunwich, a tiny cluster of houses and a pub, will likely follow its predecessor into the sea within the next century. Climate change and rising sea levels are accelerating the erosion, and coastal engineers have essentially given up trying to hold back the waves. The current residents of Dunwich know their fate, yet they stay, perhaps driven by the same stubborn attachment to place that kept their medieval predecessors in their doomed city. There's something almost mythical about this endless cycle of human settlement and oceanic reclamation, as if this particular stretch of coastline serves as a reminder that all human achievements are temporary, that the sea always wins in the end. But Dunwich's underwater legacy continues to yield new discoveries. Recent surveys have identified what appears to be a previously unknown quarter of the medieval city, preserved under a massive sand bank that formed during the Great Storm of 1286. Plans are underway for a major archaeological expedition that could revolutionize our understanding of medieval urban life, using technology that allows researchers to study the ruins without disturbing them. Virtual reality reconstructions based on sonar mapping now allow visitors to walk through the streets of underwater Dunwich, exploring houses and churches that have been hidden beneath the waves for centuries. These digital recreations have revealed the sophisticated urban planning of medieval Dunwich, with wide streets, complex drainage systems, and public buildings that rivaled anything in contemporary London or York. The story of Dunwich also serves as a powerful metaphor for our current relationship with rising seas and climate change. As coastal communities around the world face similar threats from erosion and sea level rise, Dunwich offers both a warning and a strange kind of hope. The warning is obvious. The sea is patient but inexorable, and human settlements built too close to the water's edge will eventually be claimed. But the hope comes from the extraordinary preservation of Dunwich's remains, suggesting that even when our cities disappear beneath the waves, something of human civilization persists, waiting to be rediscovered by future generations. The medieval residents of Dunwich couldn't have imagined that their lost city would become one of the most important underwater archaeological sites in the world, that their drowned streets would offer unique insights into medieval life, or that their tragedy would inspire scientists and storytellers centuries later. Perhaps most remarkably, Dunwich's story isn't over. The city that was once written off as folklore and fishermen's tales has been reborn as a site of scientific wonder and historical significance. Marine archaeologists working off the Suffolk coast have access to a perfectly preserved medieval city, a time capsule that offers unprecedented insights into how our ancestors lived, worked, and died. The techniques developed for studying underwater Dunwich are being applied to submerged sites around the world. From the ancient harbors of the Mediterranean to the drowned settlements of the North Sea, in a sense, Dunwich has achieved a kind of immortality through its destruction. The city that was forgotten for centuries is now more famous than it ever was during its medieval heyday. The local legends persist, of course. Residents of the area still speak of hearing church bells ringing beneath the waves on quiet nights, of seeing lights moving through the water that might be the spirits of Dunwich's drowned inhabitants, and of finding medieval artifacts washed up on beaches after particularly violent storms. Scientists dismiss these accounts as folklore, but the people who live with the sea every day know that it holds secrets that sonar and underwater cameras can't fully capture. The sea off Dunwich feels different from other stretches off coastline, heavier, somehow more aware, as if it's conscious of the treasures it holds and the lives it has claimed. As I prepare to leave this haunting place, I'm struck by how Dunwich's story embodies the eternal human struggle between permanence and change, between our desire to build lasting monuments to our civilization and the natural forces that ultimately reclaim everything we create. The medieval residents of Dunwich built their city to last forever, constructing massive stone churches and fortifications that they believed would stand for all time. They couldn't have imagined that their greatest legacy would be the city's destruction, that the very act of losing everything would make their story immortal. In trying to build a permanent city, they created something far more enduring, a legend that continues to capture imaginations and inspire new discoveries more than for centuries after the last building fell into the sea. The tragedy of Dunwich is also its triumph. The city that vanished beneath the waves has achieved something that none of its medieval rivals could. It has become truly timeless. While other great medieval cities have been built over, modernized, and transformed beyond recognition, Dunwich remains exactly as it was when the sea claimed it. A perfect snapshot of medieval life preserved in salt water and sand. The catastrophe that the residents feared most has become their greatest gift to posterity, ensuring that their city will be studied and remembered long after other medieval settlements have been forgotten. Standing on these crumbling cliffs, watching the sunset paint the North Sea in shades of gold and red, I can almost see the ghostly outline of medieval Dunwich shimmering beneath the waves. The city is gone, but it's not forgotten. It's simply waiting, patient and eternal, for the next generation of explorers to discover its secrets. The sea that destroyed Dunwich has become its greatest guardian, protecting the ruins from the development and destruction that have claimed so many other historical sites. In losing everything, Dunwich has gained immortality, and its story continues to unfold with each new archaeological discovery, each new technological breakthrough that reveals more of its underwater secrets. The bells of Dunwich may no longer ring above the waves, but their echo continues to resonate through the centuries, a haunting reminder that even our greatest achievements are temporary, but the stories they leave behind can last forever. The city beneath the sea has become more than just a historical curiosity. It's a window into our past, a warning about our future, and a testament to the enduring power of human memory to preserve what the sea has claimed. And perhaps that's the most remarkable thing about Dunwich. It's a city that died so completely that it was reborn as something entirely new. An underwater museum that tells the story of medieval life better than any surviving document or standing building. The waves continue to roll over Britain's lost Atlantis, but Dunwich's story is far from over. With each passing year, new technologies reveal more of its secrets, new discoveries challenge our understanding of the past, and new generations of researchers are drawn to this haunting place where history sleeps beneath the sea. The city that was once dismissed as legend has become one of the most important archaeological sites in Europe, and its influence on our understanding of medieval civilization continues to grow. In losing everything, Dunwich has gained the one thing its medieval inhabitants could never have imagined: the chance to tell their story to the world, forever preserved in the salt embrace of the sea that claimed them. As night falls over the Suffolk coast, and the first stars appear above the waves, I can't help but think that somewhere beneath these dark waters, the spirit of medieval Dunwich lives on, waiting patiently for the next chapter of its extraordinary story to unfold. The sea that destroyed the city has become its eternal guardian, and the bells that once called the faithful to prayer now ring only in memory and legend, their haunting echo a reminder that some stories are too powerful to be silenced, even by the hungry sea that swallows everything in its path. The lost city of Dunwich has found its voice again, and it's speaking to us across the centuries, telling us that even in destruction, there can be a kind of immortality, not the kind the medieval builders sought in their stone and mortar, but the kind that lives in stories and memory, and in the endless human drive to discover and preserve the truth about our past. The tide is turning now, and somewhere far below, the streets of Dunwich are receiving their nightly visitor, the sea that claimed them, the sea that preserveth them, and the sea that has made them immortal. In the morning, archaeologists will return to their underwater excavations, historians will pore over newly discovered documents, and the story of Britain's lost Atlantis will continue to unfold, one artifact at a time, one discovery at a time, and one story at a time. The city beneath the waves has become a bridge between past and present, a place where medieval voices can still be heard by those who know how to listen, and where the sea itself has become the greatest storyteller of all, preserving and protecting the memory of a civilization that refused to be forgotten, even when the waves closed over its highest towers and its people could no longer call it home. And so ends the tale of Dunwich, the city that died so completely it was reborn as legend, the place where the sea became both destroyer and preserver, the underwater kingdom that challenges everything we thought we knew about the relationship between human ambition and natural forces. But like all the best stories, this one doesn't rely on it simply waits, patient and eternal, for the next curious soul to discover its secrets and carry its message forward into the future. The bells of Dunwich will ring again, not in their drowned steeples, but in the hearts and minds of everyone who hears their story and understands that some losses are so profound they become gains, some destructions so complete they become acts of creation, and some endings so final they become new beginnings. The sea keeps its secrets, but sometimes, if you know how to look and listen, it shares them with those who understand that the greatest treasures are often found not in what survives, but in what we think we've lost forever. Dunwich is waiting, just beneath the waves, ready to tell its story to anyone brave enough to dive deep enough to hear it. The city that was lost has been found again, and its voice carries across the centuries, a testament to the enduring power of human civilization to leave its mark on the world, even when the world seems determined to erase every trace of our passing. In the end, perhaps, that's the most remarkable thing about Dunwich. It proved that even the sea, for all its power and patience, cannot truly destroy what humanity has built. It can only transform it, preserve it, and make it immortal in ways its original builders never could have imagined. The story of Britain's lost Atlantis continues, written in salt water and sand, told in the language of artifacts and archaeology, and preserved in the collective memory of a civilization that refuses to let its greatest treasures disappear beneath the waves. Dunwich lives on, not as a medieval port city, but as something far more precious, a reminder that every ending is also a beginning, every loss also a discovery, and every story that seems to end with tragedy might actually be just the first chapter of an even more extraordinary tale. The sea that claimed Dunwich has become its voice, and that voice will continue to speak across the centuries, telling anyone who will listen that some cities are too important to die, even when they disappear completely beneath the waves. The bells are silent now, but their echo will ring forever, and the city beneath the sea will continue to reveal its secrets to those who seek them, one wave at a time, one tide at a time, one story at a time. This is the legacy of Dunwich, not the medieval city that was lost, but the timeless tale that was found, preserved forever in the salt embrace of the sea that claimed it, and the endless human desire to discover what lies hidden beneath the waves. The greatest treasures, after all, are often those we thought were lost forever, and Dunwich, Britain's underwater Atlantis, is the greatest treasure of all.